All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming out to the forum today. Today we're going to be talking about setting a solid foundation for your next project. For today's technology projects, a lot of people focus on tools, platforms, designs, and integration points. And that's great, but always choosing the right technology is not going to guarantee your project's going to be successful, right? You could still actually end up with this mess. Well, you missed the slide here? Okay, this mess of people. Okay. All right, we'll just ignore that. I'll show you the picture. Anyways, you guys see the project management tree? So my updated slide didn't get there, but basically misunderstanding of requirements, designs that don't match the business value that you're creating. So in this panel, we're going to review techniques and approaches that you can use to set a solid foundation for your project. The topics that we're going to discuss is primarily around engagement between us and our clients. However, we think that these conversations will also apply to any project that you're running within your organization. We have an amazing panel of team members. These guys up here together have completed probably around 600 projects. We also want to thank Stan Yorty for joining. Stan Yorty is from Capstone Publishing and has been our client for over 6 years now. So quick introductions. I am the Director of Project Management. I've been with American Eagle for 11 years.
Wes McChristian, Chemical Practice.
John Price, Psycho Practice Lead.
Ali, Technical Manager. DJ Probus, what's my title? Sales Department. Enterprise Client Department Manager.
Large products. Rob Sanders, business analyst and project manager.
I'm Stan Yorty with Capstone Publishing. I'm the web manager.
So we have prepared some questions to get us started, but this is a completely open panel. Please feel free to ask questions at any time. Questions equal free stuff. Okay, so any questions you ask, you get free stuff. Aaron has a swag box too that you can pick from. So anyone who asks a question. All right, so starting off here, Wes, what are the first questions our customers should consider when starting a new technology project?
I think for us, it's really about kind of the W's, right? Who, what, when, and why, and really kind of establishing a clear understanding of needs when it comes to the intersection of those pieces. I think from our experience, there's often traps there too, because they all should have equal importance, and sometimes the who, for example, we'll take it for granted. We'll assume that the team is established and that stakeholders are known, when in reality it's still a reflection of needs. Likewise, understanding priorities. We had a client approach us, and basically they said, we know what. We know we want to improve our conversion rate by 10%, but we don't know how we get there. And we're, for example, very open to a scenario like that where, it's a very tactical conversation, and we can now take your needs and set the foundation and do the planning for how we anticipate actually improving that conversion rate, the what of the project.
Great. Panel, anything else to add? First questions our customers should consider when starting a new technology project.
Well, new technology can mean many different things. A new technology for you as a customer might just be creating a profile login. What does that involve? And making sure that the business goal is there as well from the company, and who's involved in those decisions have to be made. So just putting a profile for somebody to log in that may have an account in your Peachtree system or whatever else, your accounting system, there's an integration involved. So there's questions you have to ask internally. Hey, that's a nice idea to put a profile, but who else does that involve? And having all those people lined up, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, about the foundational aspects and who's responsible and accountable for certain aspects of that project.
Is anyone planning a new project internally and maybe struggling to kind of get it started internally, or have any questions about that? Want to share an example?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
But the question is not about if we're actually still trying to finish the website that we're working on, but being at that stage of a process, what I'm trying to understand, when would be a good time, and how do you know when this website has to be changed? So because I don't exist like in the web, I have a lot of different things, in packaging, I do, graphic design, and the web is not something, it's a part of my responsibility, but I'm not staying on top of the trends. And being an American Eagle customer, what questions should I ask the person that I'm working with? Whenever the trends change, how do I know that? When do I know when to stop the question?
Sure. I think getting caught up in trends can be a little bit tricky. I think the main thing you need to ask yourself is, what is the purpose of my website, and is it accomplishing that? And if there's something that you want your website to do today that it's not, I don't know specifically what business you work for, but you want people to come on, and is it lead generation? Is it sale transaction completion? I would be more concerned with, is it getting done what it needs to? Is there something else that it could be doing that I'm not yet? And whether or not that fits into, the trend, we can make things look different. Cosmetic changes are a little bit easier than functional changes. Functionally, you need to be sound, and then if you need to, do a graphic refresh, or you want, rounded buttons instead of square ones, so those are easier changes to make. And I think that's a little bit, that would be my focus would be.
So should I schedule on my calendar to come and check with my rep?
Account manager.
Once a year, or should I be watching Google Analytics and see if it's declining?
Yes.
I don't think we're ever going to say don't have a roadmap. But I think anecdotally, the simple fact that you're here, right, means you're taking steps in the right direction. And I think the other anecdotal piece of it too is it's 2018, almost 2019. We're all practically digital natives at this point. So you're actively looking at web trends every day, whether you're shopping on Amazon or scoping out competitors. So I think in the context of the roadmap, don't be afraid to say, hey, I saw this on the website of a competitor. I'd love to evaluate what that might mean for my business and our website as well. That helps.
Stan, maybe you have a couple comments on that potentially, and how it works for you in terms of when you engage American Eagle, or how do you know, how do you determine when to take advantage of trends, or how do you structure that conversation?
My position's a little different because it's my job to be on top of the trends. So, but for me, since we have a partnership with American Eagle, I have a dedicated rep. And so if I have a question, that's the first place I go to, really, I could Google it and I can spend time researching it, but they're a dedicated resource for me. It's kind of a balancing act. I have a weekly check-in with our rep, just for retainer work, for the ongoing work. I have a account rep where we meet, she checks in with me at least quarterly. So my expectation is that, at least with American Eagle, who's my primary programmer hoster, they're reaching out to me. And if they're not doing that, then I have to chase them, but I shouldn't have to. So in your role, I would think that, kind of the expectation would be that if you're working with somebody who's doing the programming, they should be on top of things, but it doesn't absolve you of trying to stay current, to Wes's point, that competitor analysis or competitor aspects are always a key driver, because if you don't spot it first, other people in your company are going to, and they're going to come to you and say, hey, company B just does what's in Majigger on their website. We don't have that. How come? Those are the conversations you don't want to have.
Yep, question?
We launched a new website a little bit over 2 years ago with you guys, and what happens very typically is it's launch and abandon. There was a web committee that everyone had their own little piece, and people make their changes on each little piece, and hence it looks like so everybody's in charge and nobody's in charge. Well, now the marketing is going to be in charge of the website, and you want to do a refresh, but there's also I'm trying to get together a committee of people, but partially to get their buy-in, but partially to see if it's working for them and that. But how is the best way to deal with the group of people who have very varying range of technical ability to design ability, to almost no design ability, and just to get them to utilize the experts that are there to help you without feeling pissed off that we took away their website.
Got it.
So this kind of addresses both questions. So I think our projects always should start with the business need. Whether it's a brand new IT project, or in your situation, we have a website that's launched, who comes to the table? And I would say the first thing you have to identify is, who does the website affect internally? Does it affect business representatives? Does it affect marketing? Does it affect IT? Does it affect sales? And once you can answer that first question of...
Not-for-profit.
Okay, we have some very good people that have experience with this as well. That they just walked in. They're actually a client of mine. But first, starting with, who does the website affect, and who actually needs to have a stake in the game, right? So once you identify the groups of people, then it's identifying who knows the effects of how it affects their business. So if I'm a sales rep in the field, do I have a contact us form on the website to get me more leads? And if the answer is no, I, as a sales representative, probably will say, hey, can we add a contact us form to our website? So it's really identifying the groups of the business, and then identifying the who of the business is a good place to start of who it affects. And the same thing to the other question. It all comes down to who's this project going to affect.
Just another point on that one as well. I would say that exactly what he said, what are the goals that need to be accomplished from each of those people? So for the people that were managing the website, or the new people that are taking it over, what ultimately do you want this to accomplish for us? As long as everybody has a shared vision of what the end goal is, or what it should be giving you, we can help with the technical aspect, or come up with some designs and run those by you and things of that nature. It's just kind of similar to the competitor analysis. Hey, we really like the way this website works on this page. We like the functionality they have. We like the look and feel. Can we get something similar to that, but with our branding and with these, specifications?
So in our company, we have a similar situation. There's a lot of different players. They have different needs, different markets. And the key question that you can ask or get answered for you is, who owns the project? Or who owns the website? One person, not. So it's you.
I inherited it.
No, to the point where if you make a decision, then that's what sticks.
One can hope.
Okay, because that's the key bet. Because when you have competing departments, competing people who are going to have either shared needs or competing needs, everybody needs to understand who the final decision maker is, and that'll make everything else much easier. If that's you, that's great. If it's not you, you need to identify who that is and make sure everybody knows who that person is. And that's from personal experience, having gone through what you're going through now.
So just related to that quickly, it's not going to solve everything for when you have an existing website, but a RACI diagram, we prepared some slides because we thought this would come up. Who's responsible for what, who's accountable, who's consulted, and who's informed, okay? It's especially helpful on a project, but the same thing can apply with portions of your website, key functionality or key pieces of content on your website. So you essentially have, here's the deliverables, and then you have it broken out on the top by the different team members or the people in your organization. You can group them by team, so this is the marketing team, this is the PM team, the technical team, that SEO team, however your organization's structured, but then you can say, okay, this is who is accountable, the one throat to choke for this piece of functionality or this content. Who's responsible is who's getting the work done. Does anyone need to be consulted to complete the work, and who needs to be informed on this because it affects other portions of the organization?
Project charter is not in the vocabulary there.
Okay.
The question that I have is, you talked about what are some of the first things to consider. Should budget come into play there pretty quick?
Absolutely.
Because I think for a lot of the small businesses, there's a ton that we'd love to do, but we're kind of limited by what kind of a budget we have to spend. So I mean, if there was an open pocketbook, we'd be doing it all.
Right.
But I think one of the first questions has to start with, how much is budgeted for this year and next year and 10 years from now? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that goes straight into foundational also. Like, what are the foundational goals of this project, including the budget? Because we can have a great conversation about what you want your product, your application to do, but then when you actually go through the numbers and start looking at, I want this functionality, here's my roadmap. Okay, well, let's go back a little bit and say, okay, well, what is within that budget? How can we meet your product and then create a roadmap after that to know what's coming down the line. And then that way you can actually get that in the budget for subsequent years. There's one thing, especially in the past probably 3-4 years, web design and application development has actually changed quite a bit. We're not tearing the house down as much anymore. We're not tearing the house down and rebuilding from the ground up. We're really trying to set really strong foundational bases in these web applications because they're so data driven now. And how can we reuse what we've established early on and reuse that in our roadmap into future development? And having that defined roadmap, and then also starting with what Chris showed with the RACI diagram, also in the case here, it shows who's responsible, who's accountable, but also with your project manager and you being the product owner on your side, that's what you have to preach internally, saying, here's the outline. I know IT over here is informed about how we're hosting this. They're also informed about how to do DNS entries, who owns the domain name, how are we doing certain functionality and opening certain ports for certain data integrations. So having all of that said, just having that proper roadmap and knowing what you might have in that project budget at the beginning also allows us to stay within a great product to start with, but then it can be enhanced further on.
Football?
One thing that's helped us is something American Eagle introduced me to, which is called a swag list. And swag I didn't know what it stood for. It stands for Seriously Wild Ass Guess. So you don't need to do a whole bunch of, detailed, because the first question you're going to get all the time is, what would it cost to do our website? And I'm like, well, I don't know. It depends what we do. And you have to build back and forth. I don't know how many times I've gone to American Eagle and say, look, I just need ballpark, off the top of your head, so I can start the conversation. If we're talking $2 million, well, we're not doing it. We're not even talking about it. If it's $10,000, well, then I can start talking. So that's also good just to have internally as a starting point. It's like, realistically, what are we talking about? Is this a $20 million project or is it a $10 million project? Because that determines whether or not we can hire Google or we can hire the kid in the garage down the street.
Anybody have any other questions? Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of what you said about not building anew, but what's existing, or working from there. What if you built our website about 3 or 4 years ago? When do you see a new website needs to be rebuilt or a new website needs to be built?
I'll take a swag at it. So it's a very loaded question in that, I have a website that has been, its roots have been there for 15 years, and we've continued to iterate on it and do upgrades and patches. At some point, yeah, we gotta move it over to something new. But I don't think it's a 3-4 year thing. If you're talking about the actual base application, that is probably going to be good for a long time. That's probably looking more at front-end cosmetics. Yeah, do we want to change the way this page layout is? Things like that. Is that what you're considering a new website, or is a new website like a complete build from the ground up?
Your second.
The second. Yeah. So I think it's hard to put a date on that, because one other thing I wanted to kind of mention with the previous comment, can you pull up the user story?
Sure. So
this is kind of the who, what, why, right? So as a blank, I want to blank so that I can. So like as a admin user, I want to be able to send someone a password reset email so they don't have to go to the website and click on it, right? If we know what you're trying to accomplish with this project, maybe there's already something that we can work with in the confines of the site. So it's not a complete rebuild and not a complete new feature. Maybe you have a feature that does something similar and we just need to tweak that to also do this. And that's why having like that blanket, what they call a user story, but I just call it the who, what, why. If we know what you're trying to accomplish, we can take a step back and say, hey, you already have something that does this in this way. Is that acceptable, or can we just give you a different way of doing it here? So it's hard to give a date.
From the technology standpoint, if the issue is that you're not happy with the base, So you're using a platform that you're not happy with, it has a lot of bugs or a lot of issues. You're sinking a lot of money into things that you shouldn't be, and you're considering migrating onto something new, something different, something you're used to, but your current company doesn't use it, something like that. I would say that's where sometimes we find ourselves having to build a new website from the ground up, because it's going to solve problems that the current platform has. So I think a good first series of questions is, what am I not happy with my current website? What doesn't it do to my liking? Or am I spending too much on something that doesn't provide me value? And does the new website is going to fix that problem? So all those conversations, I believe, are good starting points to engage with us and help with that.
Thank you.
And I think about my personal life too. We're stuck in this cycle of I need the next greatest iPhone, and I need the next greatest Android. And sometimes the answer is I just want something new and shiny. And other times it's because the battery has failed or the screen is cracked. And I think those same principles apply to the website as well. Do I just want something new and shiny, or is there a really functional hindrance that's an obstacle for the way that I'm using my website as well?
And there's some level of cost-benefit analysis that you can apply to it too, but if you know for communication, if you speak in these terms with this user story layout, you can essentially map those to new content management systems and your current content management system. So does it accomplish all of our requirements, right? Because when you list a requirement this way, I mean, that why is the key part. Because if you can't answer why, it's like, why are we doing that? For American Eagle, we're not yes men. We want to challenge you, because it's like, that's not going to impact your business or your organization. So we think you should be doing this. But if you if you take the different, and we do this a lot to help out clients with platform selection, but map the different requirements to the content management system, and is that content management system, what's the effort like to build that, or can you already do that in your current system? Anyone else have a question? We have some more prepared that we can go through.
I think I was going to say, there's nothing wrong with new and shiny.
True. We all like the new iPhone.
If you're looking at your competitors and other people next to you, and you have the most out-of-date site, then it's time for new and shiny.
It all comes down to business, right? So if my website meeting my business goals, if the answer is yes, you can price enhance it. If it's not, then you have another series of questions to ask. So, John, what should our customers know about the common traits of successful projects? So a few repeats here from question one, but there's really four things, getting away from we need the best technology, we want to deliver on time and budget. There's really four things that I think all successful projects have to have. And number one is clear and identified roles and responsibilities from the beginning of the project. I mentioned previously, number one, that's identifying what parts of the business does this project affect, then identifying who needs to be involved from each part of those businesses. And that's from who do we need to consult and who needs to be an approver of each one of these piece of functionality or a certain piece of the area. If you don't do that at the beginning of one of these website projects, I can't tell you how many times I've been bitten in the past, pre-American Eagle and American Eagle, where you deliver a piece of functionality or design, it's like, oh, well, Sue has to review this. It's like, oh, well, who's Sue? Oh, she's a CEO. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, she wasn't identified as an approver in the beginning, and that can really set a website project, whether it's an application or a reskin or what have you, that can really kind of derail a project. So that's number one. Roles and responsibilities in the RACI diagram at the beginning, and making sure that's really set and sound is really the first thing I think that needs to happen for a successful project. Number two, and we've kind of started talking about this, but I always come back to what's the business reason. And the first thing we have to do after we identify, hey, we have to achieve this business pain or whatever, it's how are we going to measure success? That's one thing that sometimes gets left in the kind of at the end of the project, right? All right, we want something new and shiny, but how are we going to measure if this new and shiny product is a success, right? Is it going to be more leads? Is it going to be more customer acquisition from our competitors? We have to define that up front front. So we actually have something to measure once it goes live. So we don't have a website that sits 2 years or 3 years, right? It's these website redesigns aren't something you launch and you let them sit. You launch it and you refine it continuously. So really identifying how you're going to measure if it's meeting your new business goals or meeting existing ones really needs to happen, again, at the beginning of the project, even before you start documenting requirements. Number 3 is a bit cliche, but it's really develop a high-performing team, right? So it's from the customer side, it's from our side, but it's really not being afraid to ask questions, right? We don't want people sitting in a room nodding at each other saying yes. We want very open dialogue questions. All right, if we suggest something, you don't really understand what we're suggesting or you disagree, it's best if you say something at that point. Or if you're saying, hey, here's how my business works, and we don't understand it, we say, oh yes, we'll just go and develop it and come back later, we're going to have problems. So it's really an open dialogue of questions, right, from both sides. It's transparency and collaboration. And the other thing that's really the past couple years of agile developments is retrospectives. A check-in, whether it's weekly or bi-weekly, of saying, how are we doing, right? All right, we wanted to launch June 10th. It's, December 1st, and we've got nothing approved. How are we going to launch this website? If you do that at the end or in the middle, you're going to have issues. But if you do that periodically, or even just on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, you can say, all right, well, these things aren't going well, and here's why we think why. In the next 2 weeks, we're going to try to improve those. So it's really, again, collaboration and kind of the retrospective of how are we doing and how can we improve as a team from both sides. And then the last thing, again, is a bit cliche, but it's deliver early and often, right? We're kind of past the days of we're going to define requirements, and then 3-4 months later, we're going to deliver the entire site. That model really does not work anymore. And again, it's getting past analysis paralysis and saying, all right, well, we got to make sure we got all the requirements down to a T, and we got the designs pixel perfect. From my perspective, projects run much smoother if we say, all right, this is great. We can move forward, we can develop this, and because guess what? We're going to refine it after we build it. So getting to that refinement process sooner rather than later can definitely make projects run much smoother. And all the projects I've been a part of, that's how you launch sooner rather than later. Saying, all right, this is good enough, let's develop it and refine it as we go. So those are really the four things: roles and responsibilities, define a way to measure, high-performing team collaboration, and then obviously kind of delivering early and as quickly as possible.
Okay. And, yep, question?
I had a question because I've PM'd quite a few projects, and I've noticed that you get this tunnel vision, right? You get so excited about a project, you get halfway through it, you start to see the exhaustion, and then you end. And one of the things that I was thinking about as you were talking about evolution, iteration, et cetera, is the lack of that post-mortem discussion that happens after projects, because you'll design a whole new website. You'll get really passionate about it, you'll finish it, you check the box, it's done, but if you don't have that dialogue, you miss the opportunity to have thoughtful iterations and evolution, and then you wind up in a place like that where it's almost too big to chew, and suddenly you need a whole new website because you don't have this.
Absolutely.
The one thing I will say, these projects are never done.
Right.
Launch is not done. Launch is really the beginning. Right. Because now you can actually start measuring how the website's doing. So defining how you're going to measure, launch it as soon as you can, and then start measuring how you can improve. Because the web is not perfect. So.
And there's a lot of, in team foundation, there's a lot of like the storming, forming, and norming, right? But like, you don't necessarily have to wait for the end to do that retrospective. I mean, that's a big thing in agile development. Not everything is agile, some is more waterfall, but still you can take that approach of like, just switching a team member. Maybe you have someone on the team, and if you have that, Google says the #1 aspect of high-performing teams, they did a lot of research, is that psychological safety, right? And John hinted on that. Does the team feel safe to take risks in front of each other? Like, nothing's a stupid question, right? And we have to take that approach with you guys too, because you're our customers. We don't know everything about your business in the beginning, but we pride ourselves on learning that. So even just a tweak to who, maybe someone else is responsible for testing, or maybe someone else is going to take on this. That can make a big productivity leap for a project. So doing those retrospectives is something we always encourage. Question?
There's just a lot of good tools that you guys are talking about that I just haven't seen before that you're using for like management, checks and balances. What's realistic in a partnership between a client and a website provider about what a client needs to ask for versus what a website provider can proactively help with? It just feels like maybe not everyone in the room is an expert. I know for us specifically at our company, we don't have a dedicated person for our website, and so it's really difficult. We get so stuck in the day-to-day, and then we get, a quarterly or a, bi-yearly report, and we look at that and we make some high-level tweaks, but, to her point about like, when is it time to update a bigger project or a bigger website? At what point in a relationship does the client always need to be asking, or is that something we can expect a website vendor to say like, hey, look, we did your quarterly assessment, it looks like you're way up to date, your load time's too high, and let us help you.
I'll take a first stab at the beginning part of this. So number one is, again, it's a partnership, really. And if we talk about a high-performing team, that can mean many different things. Number one is constant, I say constant, but very often check-ins, right? Let's say you do 1 hour a month with us. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be talking every couple weeks or every month to say, hey, how's your business changed? Because if we're not up to date, your business could be changing weekly. And if we don't know about it, we can't suggest things. And that the onus is on us as well to push for those. I think as a company, we're getting stronger and stronger as that as well. And obviously in those, again, these touch points, it's you coming to the table from here's our business updates, here's what we need. And from us, we have to be proactive and just simply saying, hey, here are some trends, or hey, I looked at your website, here's this new need of yours, here's what I suggest. It's getting into a rhythm. These teams are all about rhythm and constant communication.
And I think it's easy to say, but it's hard to identify that. I think in that situation, there's really kind of two avenues that we proceed with. And one is the proactive stuff that John's mentioning, but the more predominant one that we find the rhythm more falling into is a reactive. Right, to say, okay, well, this happened, so I need to do this, instead of making an active decision to get ahead and plan and be proactive about, hey, these are the things that we're seeing, the trends and that sort of thing. And I would say don't be afraid to confront. Chris mentioned the stages of a team, and storming is something that I think we're all just as average people afraid to do, but I think it's perfectly fine to say, hey, I would love more proactive recommendations to see if that's something that would help you in your business.
If you succeed online, so do we, right? So, I think one of the big takeaways is this, what are your business objectives? What are your website goals or system goals? So we do more than just websites, right? So what is the business objectives? What does the system need to do? What is a conversion, to support those business objectives? If you have an e-commerce site, maybe we want to improve average order value, we want to improve conversion rate. And then the KPI is really how are we going to measure that? But if we know that up front, and that's on us too. We need to pull that information out of you guys. You guys need to understand that too. But if we tailor our conversations always around that, we need to provide that value. Your website's going to get better. Your organization is going to get more leads or more traffic or more conversions. That's definitely a key point there.
Last one, sorry.
Sure.
Just along with all the tools you're showing, those diagrams, do you guys have for initiating a big project, going back to what this is about, is there a best case scenario template where you have all of the stuff that we can kind of hold our own team responsible? Because I know, sometimes we're frustrated, but a lot of it falls back to us on not providing enough direction, and we do solutionize, and we just say, this is broken, fix this, and then we get to a place where we're not happy and you guys aren't happy. So is there a place where we can hold ourselves accountable to give the right information based on a template or some sort of system that you guys have in place to help guide us? Because we're definitely not the experts.
Yeah, we definitely have tools for that. Sometimes it's more of a conversation about what specifically is a project need to do. We're pretty much tool agnostic. We do use different tools. We have a lot of approaches that help with that. We send status reports, and what's important is that we identify risks on the project, okay? And it goes back to, I think, that RACI diagram too of who is responsible for approving what. And if we know that on your side and you're our main point of contact and you're not responsible for approving anything, then we're happy to jump in meetings with other stakeholders on the project too to explain the importance. We do that a lot, especially when we're trying to expedite and get these projects done. Does anyone else have?
You kind of took mine.
What's that?
I said you kind of took my answer.
Okay. Okay. How many minutes we got? We got about 6 minutes left here.
Can you go back to that racing diagram? You were there for a couple of minutes.
Sure.
We didn't really go through the prior one as
Okay.
to what they stand for and that sort of thing.
Okay, so RACI is, it's just an acronym for responsible, so who is and who's doing the work, okay? We usually align this to deliverables. So what are the deliverables on the project? And so responsible, who's doing the work? Accountable, whose head will roll if it goes wrong, and who has the authority to make the decisions? Consulted, anyone, is there anyone that needs to be discussed, that needs to be involved in the conversation, that can tell me more about what needs to be done? Do we know who all the stakeholders are? And informed is anyone whose work actually depends on the deliverable. Maybe there's if someone's doing design, they might need to know what the site map looks like. So they don't need to put the site map together, but they need to be informed on what the site map looks like.
In most cases, the accountable person is a lot of times the product owner, the project manager. So really the project manager's name's gonna be on there in a matrix, you know, what the actual deliverable is and then who the staff is. If you're the product owner, your name's gonna be accountable for a lot of different things, because you being the liaison of communication between the project manager on our side, that's the accountability. We're both accountable for the success of your project. But taking that to other committees, in the case here too, you can say, hey, I'm informing you of this, but you are responsible for providing me this. And that starts that conversation. And then you can go down a road of that, whatever that documentation or idea might be.
Unfortunately, there's turnover, right? I mean, at your organizations, it does happen, and this is a great tool for us to even go back to really understand how to plug in the holes. If someone on here, you know, leaves, it's like, okay, what are the holes that we have to fill, and what's the onboarding plan for the person that's coming into that role?
And that's happened quite a bit. And I heard back here, as far as there wasn't a product owner or a project owner, everybody's kind of informed, but who's responsible, who's accountable? And that's where I've often found projects just fall apart. Starts off really strong. You have an accountable person, responsible person, and all of a sudden they get a new job and nobody knows where anything is in that organization. So it's really stuff on us, and a lot of times we have to get in the middle of it and mitigate and then run projects for clients and get somebody trained up on where we've been for the past 2 months, 3 months in that project. So we want things to be successful, and I think as a company, we really try hard to be really invested in your project as well for that success.
I wanted to kind of answer your question about when there's really nobody involved or in charge. Ideally, you've got one person talking on either side. You've got one person talking to your vendor, one person. But if you can't have that, you can, as a company, make the decision to have American Eagle do that for you. I mean, it's obviously going to cost you more money to do that, but we see to a point. Yeah, right. Well, but we've done in the past. We have certain situations where, like, we've got enough people, we know what we're doing. In some cases, it's like, we think we know what we're doing, but we clearly don't. So you really need to put the onus on the people that you're working with on hiring and saying, you need to push back, you need to guide us, we need you to hold our hand in this case. And also be clear where, okay, you don't need to be a little heavy-handed. But as a company, you still have to make the decision. You can't expect American Eagle or another vendor just to start taking over because they think that's best for you. And again, in your situation, that means somebody has to step up, even if they're not going to be the owner. Somebody has to at least take volunteer and say, okay, I'm going to start gathering all the info, I'm going to funnel it, and then they can help us sort it out.
All right, probably have time for one more question. Anyone? All right. I think it was a great discussion, guys, and thanks for coming to our session. How can we support you if you do have an upcoming project? We're definitely here to help support you. And we have a bunch of practices that work and we apply them to all projects, but we know that every project is not the same. And we always adapt our process to, create that, to understand your business objectives and tailor it to create value for you guys.
And a lot of this will be at the happy hour, 4 to 6. So be sure to grab one of us if you want to explore our minds more.
Great. Okay, thanks, everyone.
Please fill out the survey. I